She was chained and treated like an animal until a kind human freed her. It was a place of order, precise and sterile, but for Lyra, it was nothing more than a prison. Chains held her arms gently but firmly, enough to prevent her from wandering freely. She had learned to move carefully, respecting the limits imposed upon her, but inside, her mind was untamed. Lyra was not like the others around her, or at least, not like the creatures that occasionally came and went in this world of metal and glass. She was different, intelligent in ways that her captors could not understand. They treated her like she was a specimen, something to be observed and catalogued, but Lyra knew she was more. She knew she could think, feel, and dream even if no one else would acknowledge it. Through the barred window in her small chamber, Lyra watched the sky. The twin suns of her planet were dipping low, casting long shadows that stretched across the strange terrain outside. The view was breathtaking, though she had no freedom to enjoy it fully. Trees with translucent leaves shimmered with colors she could not name, and distant mountains glowed softly in the fading light. Sometimes, when she allowed her mind to drift, she imagined running through those forests, feeling the soft ground beneath her feet, and tasting the wind that carried scents of flowers she would never touch from behind her chains. She closed her eyes, and for a moment she could almost feel free. The facility was quiet during this part of the day. The robotic overseers patrolled in slow, deliberate movements, scanning the halls with red sensors that occasionally flickered. They spoke to each other in short, precise tones, but never to her. Lyra had learned their patterns. She could predict where they would move next, which corners they would check, and when the doors would open for the next routine check. Knowledge was her small comfort. In a place where she had no control over her body, she clung to control over her mind. She observed, calculated, and planned quietly. Freedom, she knew, would not come easily, but she also knew it must come. Her days followed a strict rhythm. Morning, they would feed her. Midday, they would conduct tests, usually of endurance or problem-solving, though they never saw the deeper thoughts running in her mind. Night, they would leave her in her chamber alone, except for the occasional maintenance bot checking the chains or the locks. At first, she had tried to resist, to shout, to break her restraints with sheer strength. But she quickly realized that resistance only brought frustration. The chains were unyielding and the overseers were patient. Her spirit, however, could not be restrained. She learned to endure, to observe, and to imagine. Lyra was not the only being held here. She shared the facility indirectly with creatures of all shapes and sizes, some intelligent, some less so. They had all come from different corners of the galaxy, captured for research, for observation, or for curiosity. Some had lost hope long ago, accepting their captivity as permanent. Lyra could see it in their eyes. They had stopped dreaming. But she refused to surrender in the same way. She whispered to herself, softly, in a language of her own making, telling herself that one day she would see the sky not through bars, but as a friend, as a companion to her steps. One particular night, Lyra noticed a small detail that had escaped her before. A panel near the far wall of her chamber flickered with a subtle light, barely perceptible, but enough to catch her attention. Her mind raced with possibilities. Was it a flaw in the system? A weakness in her prison? She spent hours studying it from her position, her chains clicking softly as she shifted slightly to see better. Though she could not reach it yet, she imagined what might happen if she could. Perhaps there was a way out. Perhaps she could find a friend outside these walls who would understand her and help her see freedom for real. She had always believed that kindness existed somewhere in the universe, though she had yet to meet it. It was a fragile hope, but hope was stronger than chains. Lyra's captors never spoke directly to her, but they left traces of their curiosity in the machines they used. She discovered that she could predict their behavior with surprising accuracy. If a monitor flickered a certain way, a bot would approach from the east corridor. If a panel blinked a steady red, the lock on her chains was about to be inspected. She used these small patterns to create a mental map of the facility, noting which areas were more accessible, which corridors were less patrolled, and where the oversight was weakest. She had begun to imagine walking these halls when no one was watching, touching the walls of her prison as if they were doors to the outside. It was not freedom yet, but it was a start. Despite the strict and silent environment, Lyra sometimes spoke quietly to the others in her facility. Though most could not understand her, she spoke to them anyway. She shared stories of distant stars and imagined planets filled with beauty and wonder. She told them of forests where light danced on every leaf and rivers that sparkled with more colors than anyone could name. Sometimes she could see understanding in their eyes, sometimes curiosity. She realized that even in captivity there could be a spark of connection. Even in this cold, mechanical place, she could share a piece of her soul. Her favorite time was when the lights dimmed and the facility seemed to breathe in silence. The hum of the machines became a gentle background, and Lyra could lie quietly, feeling the faint vibrations of the world beyond her chains. She remembered stories from her youth, stories her parents had told her about distant lands and stars full of life. The memories comforted her. They reminded her of who she was, of what she could be, of what she would be when she was free. She imagined a day when she could teach others about the wonders she had once seen only through bars, about the beauty of the universe that no machine could contain. One day, a new presence arrived. The facility's entrance opened with a low hiss, and a figure stepped inside, not a robot, but a human. Lyra had never seen a human before. They moved with a quiet confidence, but not the rigid mechanical steps of the overseers. There was curiosity in their eyes, not inspection or calculation. Lyra watched silently, her mind alert. This human did not approach like the others. They moved slowly, observing, noting details, and yet respecting boundaries. For the first time, Lyra felt a flicker of something unfamiliar in her chest. Hope. Perhaps this being was different. Perhaps kindness existed in someone she had not yet met. The human paused near her chamber, tilting their head as they studied her. Their eyes were warm, not cold, and their movements gentle, careful not to startle her. Lyra did not speak, but she watched, sensing that this human's intentions were not like the others. Over the next several days, the human returned, always patient, always silent in the right moments, speaking softly when necessary. Lyra learned to recognize their voice, a soothing tone that made her heart race with cautious optimism. The human observed her, yes, but there was no cruelty in their gaze. They seemed to understand in some way that she was not just a captive, but a being of thought, feeling, and hope. As she spent time with this human, Lyra began to explore her own abilities more. She realized that her mind could communicate in ways beyond words, sending subtle signals, impressions of ideas and feelings that the human seemed to sense intuitively. She practiced carefully, learning to project small emotions, trust, curiosity, even joy. Each time the human responded, even with a small smile or a gentle gesture, Lyra's confidence grew. Perhaps, she thought, there really was someone in this universe who could see her not as a prisoner, but as a friend. She began to imagine a future where she was free, walking under the twin suns, not chained but moving as she pleased, exploring the forests and mountains she had dreamed of for so long. Time passed, and the bond between Lyra and the human deepened. Though she remained chained, she felt lighter in a way she had not experienced since her captivity began. She began to anticipate the human's visits, and each encounter filled her with new ideas of what might be possible. Freedom, once a distant dream, now seemed tangible. She envisioned a day when the chains would fall away, when she could step outside and feel the wind and sun on her skin. Every lesson, every moment of trust built between her and the human became a step toward that dream. Lyra understood that hope was more powerful than chains, more enduring than any lock or mechanism. And she resolved, quietly but firmly, that she would not remain a prisoner forever. As the twin suns rose once more, casting their golden light across the facility, Lyra looked out of her barred window and imagined the world beyond. She no longer saw it as a distant, unreachable place. She saw it as a land waiting for her, a place where she could finally be herself. The human, whose kindness had become her lifeline, would play a role in that journey, though she did not yet know how. But for the first time, Lyra felt certainty in her heart. She would be free. She would explore, learn, and share her knowledge and spirit with the universe. Chains could hold her body, but they could never bind her mind or her hope. And in that hope, she found the courage to dream even bigger than before, imagining a day when she could walk under the open sky, unbound, unafraid, and alive in every sense of the word. The next morning, the research facility was quieter than usual. Lyra had already noticed the subtle changes when she awoke. The hum of the machines seemed softer, the corridors less rigid in their motions, and the air carried a faint hint of unfamiliar warmth. She watched from her small chamber as the human approached once more. Today, they carried something different, a small device, smooth and glowing softly, which Lyra had never seen before. They knelt at the edge of her enclosure, placing it gently on the floor, and looked at her with the same patient gaze that had started to stir hope within her. At first, Lyra was wary. She had learned to be cautious. Every machine, every robot, every procedure had a purpose she did not understand, and she knew that any sudden movement could be noticed, recorded, and corrected. But there was something in the humans' approach, the gentle tilt of their head, the careful way they placed the device, that spoke of curiosity, not threat. Slowly, tentatively, she moved closer, her chains clinking softly. She sniffed the device, studied its lights, and felt a spark of excitement. Perhaps this was another way to communicate, or another clue to a world beyond her prison. The human crouched down and began to speak in low tones. Though Lyra could not understand the words, the sound carried meaning. The voice was steady, warm, and calm. She sensed reassurance and patience in every syllable. For a creature held in captivity for so long, this alone was a relief. Lyra had grown used to silence, to being ignored or observed without acknowledgement. But now, with each soft sound, she felt recognized, not as a specimen, not as a subject of study, but as a being worthy of attention and care. Over the following days, the human returned frequently. Each time they brought small objects, shapes that glowed, spheres that hovered, tools that could be touched and explored. They did not force Lyra to interact, nor did they push her beyond her comfort. Instead, they allowed her to approach in her own time, to investigate at her own pace. Lyra began to learn from these interactions, discovering the device's patterns and effects. When she touched one of the spheres, it responded, changing color or emitting soft vibrations. Sometimes the changes seemed random, but Lyra quickly noticed sequences, patterns, and repetitions. Her mind, sharp and curious, began to map the possibilities. One evening, after the human had left, Lyra experimented alone. She moved the spheres in specific sequences and watched the lights shift accordingly. A small thrill ran through her as she realized she was learning something new, something the overseers had never anticipated. The chains on her arms felt less like limitations and more like reminders that even within boundaries, there could be discovery. Knowledge was freedom in itself. Her heart swelled with quiet excitement as she realized that she could interact with the world around her in ways she had never imagined, even from within her cage. The human's kindness went beyond the devices. They spoke to her softly about places and experiences that Lyra could hardly imagine. Stars that danced in the sky, planets covered in glowing forests, rivers that shimmered with colors unseen. Though the words were foreign, Lyra understood the emotions behind them. She began to share back in her own way, using subtle gestures, soft hums, and movements of her body that carried meaning. The humans seemed to understand, responding with smiles and gentle nods. A bond was forming, a connection that transcended species and circumstance. Lyra felt something she had almost forgotten: trust. As trust grew, Lyra found herself observing the facility differently. She noticed hidden corridors, small gaps between panels, and moments when the robotic overseers paused or moved predictably. Patterns emerged in the rigid routines, and Lyra's mind, once preoccupied with dreams of escape, now considered plans. Not yet a full escape, but small steps, ways to gain knowledge, ways to understand her environment. And most importantly, she began to imagine the humans' help as part of her future beyond the chains. Perhaps together, they could find a way to reach freedom, though she did not yet know how. The human, whom Lyra now thought of as Elias, began to introduce subtle games, challenges that exercised her mind rather than her body. Sometimes they placed a small puzzle near her cage, sometimes a glowing pattern that she could manipulate. Each time, Lyra approached carefully, studying before acting. She realized she was learning faster than ever, sharpening her senses, observing details she had ignored before. These moments brought a sense of purpose she had not felt in captivity. Her days, once measured by monotony and confinement, now held meaning and excitement. One afternoon, as Lyra experimented with a set of glowing spheres, Elias paused nearby and did something unusual. They knelt closer, lowering their head to her level, and touched the surface of the cage softly. Lyra froze at first, uncertain of the gesture, but then she felt it, a subtle warmth, a silent promise that this human was not like the others. For the first time, she imagined what it would feel like to be free, not just in mind, but in body. Her heart beat faster as she realized that perhaps her dream of seeing the outside world was not so distant after all. Night fell and the twin moons rose, bathing the facility in pale silver light. Lyra lay on the floor of her chamber, staring up at the barred ceiling, thinking of everything she had learned that day. The spheres, the patterns, the humans' gestures, and their voice, all of it had changed something inside her. She felt more alive than ever, more connected to the world beyond the bars. And as she drifted into sleep, she imagined a path, small and winding, that might one day lead her to freedom. The next morning, the human returned with another surprise. They had brought a small map, projected in soft, glowing lines onto the floor of her chamber. Lyra approached cautiously, fascinated. The map showed the layout of her world, or at least a part of it she had never explored. Valleys, forests, mountains, and lakes were marked with precision, yet the map's lines pulsed gently as if alive. Lyra felt a rush of curiosity and excitement. She had never been allowed to see anything like this. The human knelt beside the map and touched a glowing line, pointing to it in a way that suggested she should pay attention. Though she did not understand every detail, she sensed the meaning. There was a world outside, and there were ways to move within it. Over the following days, Lyra and Elias spent hours together with the map. She learned to recognize symbols, to follow the lines with her fingers, and to imagine pathways through forests and over mountains. Each day, her knowledge of the outside world grew, and with it, her confidence. She began to visualize her escape in more detail, thinking not only of leaving the facility but of where she would go, what she would see, and how she would survive. Elias never rushed her, never pressured her. Instead, they guided gently, allowing her to take the lead. Lyra realized that this was the first true friendship she had ever experienced, one built on trust, respect, and mutual understanding. One evening, while they studied the map together, Lyra noticed something remarkable. A section of the facility near the far wall had a faint energy signature. It flickered, barely noticeable, but she could detect it with careful attention. The human noticed her interest and nodded, encouraging her to investigate. Lyra approached the section of the wall and traced her fingers along the edges. She realized it was a panel, perhaps an access point to a corridor beyond her chamber. Her heart raced. Could this be a clue to freedom? Could the human help her explore it? For the first time in her life, the possibility of escape seemed real, not just a dream in her mind. Lyra and Elias began to plan small tests. At night, when the facility quieted, she would move as much as her chains allowed, studying the panel, feeling for weak points, and observing the movements of the robotic overseers. Elias offered guidance, giving her hints without taking over. He taught her to anticipate patterns, to notice small details in the robot's patrols, and to think several steps ahead. Lyra's mind, always sharp, absorbed the lessons quickly. She realized that freedom was not just a matter of physical escape, but also of intelligence, observation, and patience. As the days turned into weeks, Lyra and Elias' bond deepened further. She began to recognize the human's intentions, to understand the subtle cues in their expressions and gestures. They shared silent moments, watching the twin suns set over the distant mountains, and in those moments, Lyra felt something she had almost forgotten: hope. She imagined walking through those forests, feeling the wind on her skin and knowing that she was free. The thought made her chest swell with a quiet determination. She would not allow the chains to define her. She would find a way out with Elias by her side. Lyra's nights became filled with dreams of freedom. She imagined running across vast fields, exploring forests and rivers, meeting other creatures, and learning about the world beyond her prison. Each dream felt vivid, as if she were already there. And each morning, she woke with renewed energy, eager to test her observations, eager to learn more from the human who had become her friend. The facility, once a place of despair, had transformed in her eyes. It was still a prison, yes, but it was also a classroom, a place of preparation for the life she hoped to lead beyond its walls. One evening, as the twin moons rose high in the sky, Lyra felt a strange sense of anticipation. Elias entered with the glowing spheres and the map, but there was something different tonight, a quiet excitement in the human's eyes. They knelt beside her and touched the chains gently. Lyra felt a shiver of hope. Perhaps tonight something would change. Perhaps the next step in her journey toward freedom was near. And though she did not yet know exactly what it would be, she felt ready. For the first time in her life, Lyra believed that escape was possible, not just in dreams, but in reality. And as the moons cast their pale light across her chamber, Lyra closed her eyes and imagined the wind on her face, the warmth of the twin suns, and the endless possibilities that awaited her. She was no longer just a captive. She was a learner, a thinker, a being with hope, determination, and a friend who believed in her. And with that hope, she felt stronger than ever, ready to face whatever steps lay ahead. The days passed slowly, but in a way that felt different to Lyra. Time no longer dragged like a heavy weight. It moved with purpose. With Elias by her side, the world, even the confined facility, began to feel like a place of possibility. Each day, they explored the limits of her environment together. Sometimes it was just observing the robots, routines. Other times it was experimenting with the glowing spheres and devices Elias had introduced. Through these activities, Lyra discovered new abilities within herself, powers of perception, deduction, and even subtle communication that transcended language. The more she practiced, the more confident she felt. Elias had begun to treat Lyra not as a captive, but as a partner. He would kneel beside her, letting her take the lead and follow her instructions, encouraging her choices. This subtle shift changed everything. Lyra realized that her intelligence, long ignored and underestimated, had value. Every puzzle, every sequence of lights, every test of patience was a chance to sharpen her mind and prepare for the moment she could step beyond the chains. She felt a rising sense of pride, not in defiance, but in her ability to adapt and learn. Humanity, she thought, was remarkable in ways she had never fully appreciated before. Elias represented that best side of humans, curiosity, patience, and the willingness to connect. One afternoon, while the twin suns were high in the sky, Lyra noticed something she had not seen before, a tiny vent in the far corner of her chamber. It was partially hidden behind one of the larger devices she had played with earlier, and its size suggested it was meant for maintenance purposes, not escape. Still, her eyes widened. The vent offered a possible path, however narrow, toward freedom. Her mind raced as she studied it. Could she fit through it? Could Elias help her without alerting the robotic overseers? The questions spun through her mind, but instead of fear, she felt excitement. This was the first tangible opportunity she had seen in months, and she could feel her heart pounding with the possibility of change. Over the next several days, Lyra and Elias focused on the vent. Elias observed from outside the chains, guiding her carefully. They tested the measurements, studied the rotation patterns of the robots, and calculated the quietest moments when the vent could be approached. Lyra felt empowered. For the first time, she was not simply reacting to her environment. She was planning, preparing, and shaping her own destiny. Each success, no matter how small, reinforced her belief in herself and in the kindness of this human who had chosen to help her. One evening, as the twin moons rose high above the facility, Lyra decided to try something new. Using her intelligence and the knowledge she had gained from Elias, she manipulated one of the smaller devices. The sphere glowed and pulsed in rhythm with her thoughts, responding to her intent. She realized she could use it to distract the robotic overseers temporarily, giving her a brief window to examine the vent more closely. Her pulse quickened with the thrill of discovery. She was testing her abilities, learning not only about the machines around her, but about herself, her resilience, her patience, and her determination to be free. Elias watched quietly, giving her space while remaining near enough to offer support. He whispered soft words of encouragement, and though Lyra could not understand all the sounds, she felt their meaning. Together, they were a team, a combination of human ingenuity and Lyra's natural intelligence. The bond between them had grown strong, built on trust, understanding, and mutual respect. Lyra realized that this bond was more than friendship. It was a bridge between worlds, proof that beings from different species could work together for something greater than themselves. Days turned into nights and nights into days, but Lyra's determination never wavered. She spent hours observing the robots, noticing patterns in their routines. Some paused longer than others at certain points, some turned their sensors in predictable sequences, and some seemed oblivious to minor changes in the environment. Lyra recorded all these observations in her mind, creating a detailed map of the facility's rhythm. She could feel herself growing stronger, sharper, more aware of the world around her. Every small victory added to her confidence. Every insight, every observation, every new piece of knowledge was a step toward freedom. One quiet night, Lyra made a breakthrough. She discovered a way to manipulate the light sensors on the floor, creating a pattern that would make the robots briefly misread her location. The effect was subtle, but enough to give her a few precious minutes of solitude near the vent. Her heart raced as she tested the pattern, watching the red sensors blink in confusion before returning to their normal scanning routine. She smiled, a sensation she had not felt in months. Progress, she realized, could be slow, but it was possible. And in the presence of Elias, she felt courage. The next day, Elias introduced something new. He had found a series of tools, small, smooth objects that could be used to loosen certain panels or manipulate locks. He did not explain everything, instead allowing Lyra to experiment to discover their potential herself. She quickly adapted, learning how to use each tool carefully, testing their effects on small panels and mechanisms. Each success, no matter how minor, felt monumental. She realized that every skill she mastered brought her closer to the moment when she could move beyond the chains. The sense of possibility was intoxicating. Lyra's mind also began to explore new ideas. She wondered about the world beyond the facility, imagining forests that glowed under alien moons, mountains that touched the sky, and rivers that sparkled with strange colors. She imagined meeting other beings, learning their stories, and sharing her own knowledge. The thought filled her with joy. Freedom was no longer a distant dream. It was a vision she could see, a life she could imagine, and a world she could one day touch. The presence of Elias made it feel achievable. She had a partner, a friend, someone who understood the value of kindness and the power of collaboration. Over time, Lyra also noticed changes in her own abilities. She could sense subtle energy waves, the quiet hum of life in the devices around her, and even small vibrations in the floor that revealed movement beyond her immediate view. She practiced focusing on these senses, learning to interpret them. Elias encouraged her, praising each new insight with gentle words and patient guidance. Lyra's confidence soared. She realized that her captivity had not broken her spirit. It had only made her more determined, more resilient, and more aware of the power she held within herself. One evening, as the twin moons cast silver light across the chamber, Lyra sat near the vent, her fingers tracing the edges. She felt excitement, anticipation, and a sense of calm determination. She whispered softly to herself, imagining the moment when the chains would fall away and she could step into the world beyond. Elias knelt beside her, placing a reassuring hand on the floor near her own. No words were needed. Their connection, built over days and weeks of shared effort, understanding, and patience, spoke louder than language. Lyra felt a deep sense of trust, knowing that whatever steps lay ahead, she would not face them alone. The following morning, they began a careful simulation. Lyra practiced moving toward the vent, testing her agility and the timing of the robot's patrols. Elias guided her subtly, giving hints and encouragement without overstepping. She practiced multiple times, refining her approach, learning when to pause, when to move, and how to react to unexpected changes. Each attempt brought new insights, and with every success, her belief in herself grew stronger. She realized that freedom was not simply about breaking chains. It was about knowledge, preparation, and the courage to act when the moment was right. By midweek, Lyra felt ready for the next stage. She had mastered the timing of the robots, understood the limits of her chains, and explored the tools and devices that could aid her. The vent, once a simple curiosity, now represented hope, possibility, and the first tangible step toward the world she longed to see. She sat quietly, imagining herself slipping through it, feeling the warmth of the sun and breathing the air of freedom. Elias watched her, offering quiet support, knowing that the moment of action would come soon. In the evenings, they continued their shared routines of learning, observing, and imagining. They spoke little, but the silence was not empty. It was filled with understanding, connection, and mutual respect. Lyra found herself looking forward to these moments, cherishing the patience and kindness that Elias offered. She began to understand that the journey to freedom was as much about trust and collaboration as it was about skill or intelligence. And with that understanding, her heart swelled with anticipation for the day when she could step beyond the chains, not as a captive, but as a being fully alive and free. One night, as the twin moons reached their highest point, Lyra felt a sense of readiness unlike anything she had experienced before. She whispered to herself, imagining the wind on her skin, the soft ground beneath her feet, and the endless possibilities that awaited her beyond the vent. She glanced at Elias, who nodded gently, their eyes reflecting quiet encouragement and unwavering trust. The preparation, the learning, and the bond they had built over weeks had brought them to this moment. The next step, she knew, would take courage, patience, and a leap of faith. But for the first time, she believed with certainty that it was possible. Lyra took a deep breath, feeling the rhythm of the twin moons above, the subtle hum of life around her, and the steady presence of Elias by her side. She had learned, grown, and prepared. She had hope, trust, and determination. And in that moment, she realized something profound. Freedom was not just a destination. It was a journey built on knowledge, compassion, and courage. And she was ready to begin. The night was calm, and the twin moons hung low in the sky, casting silver light over the research facility. Lyra's heart raced with anticipation as she prepared for what she had been waiting for weeks, the first real steps toward freedom. She sat near the vent, tracing the edges with her fingers, memorizing its size, shape, and position. Each detail had been studied carefully, every moment of observation recorded in her mind. She knew the path she wanted to take, and she felt ready. Elias knelt nearby, watching her with quiet encouragement. His presence was steady, grounding, and reassuring. For months, Lyra had been learning, preparing, and practicing. Now all that preparation would be put to the test. She adjusted the chains slightly, making sure they would not catch on the edges of the vent. Her movements were deliberate and careful, the result of patience and repeated practice. Elias watched silently, offering gentle guidance only when necessary. They had built a connection stronger than words could describe, a bond built on trust, understanding, and shared determination. Lyra felt that bond in every step she took, and it gave her courage. The robotic overseers moved as usual through the facility, their red sensors sweeping back and forth, scanning for anomalies. Lyra had studied their routines meticulously. She knew when they paused, when they turned, and how long their sensors lingered in certain areas. She timed her movements to coincide with the brief moments of distraction. Every step was calculated, every motion precise. The vent loomed ahead, narrow but promising, a door to the world she had only imagined. She focused on her breathing, calming her heart, and prepared to move. With a deep breath, Lyra shifted slightly and then another small movement, inching closer to the vent. Her fingers traced the edges again, feeling for weak points, and then she paused. Elias nodded gently, signaling that it was safe to continue. She adjusted the chains one more time, making sure they would not snag, and then, with careful determination, she began to slide into the vent. It was tight, but she was small and agile, and her body adapted quickly to the narrow space. The vent's edges pressed against her skin, but instead of fear, she felt exhilaration. Every moment brought her closer to freedom. Elias watched carefully, his presence a calm reassurance. He knew she could handle this, but he remained nearby in case guidance was needed. Lyra focused on the path ahead, feeling the cool metal against her hands and feet, listening to the soft hum of the facility's machinery. She moved with patience and precision, each motion measured, each breath steady. The vent twisted and turned, and she had to pause several times, adjusting her position. Yet with each pause, she felt more confident, more capable. She was finally putting all her preparation into action, and it felt empowering. Finally, she reached a small opening at the end of the vent. It led into a narrow maintenance corridor, one she had never explored before. She paused, her chest heaving slightly with exertion, and looked back. The facility, once so confining, seemed smaller now. Her chains, though still in place, felt less like a prison and more like a reminder of how far she had come. She took a deep breath, then began to move through the corridor, her senses heightened, every sound and shadow noted carefully. She had learned to trust her instincts, and they guided her well. The corridor was narrow and quiet, lit only by dim lights overhead. Lyra moved slowly, listening for the soft hum of robots or the faint clicks of doors opening. Her knowledge of the facility allowed her to anticipate each step, each turn. She moved with caution, but also with a growing sense of confidence. Elias followed at a short distance, watching silently, offering gentle guidance when necessary. Together, they navigated the facility, a team of intelligence and trust, each movement bringing Lyra closer to the outside world she had long dreamed of seeing. After several minutes, they reached a door at the end of the corridor. It was heavier than the vent, with a locking mechanism designed to prevent unauthorized access. Lyra's heart raced, but she had prepared for this moment. Using the tools Elias had provided and the knowledge she had gained from observation, she carefully manipulated the lock. Each adjustment required patience, precision, and steady hands. The lock resisted at first, but Lyra did not panic. She focused, adjusted her approach, and slowly, carefully, the mechanism clicked open. A thrill of excitement ran through her. She was one step closer. The door opened to a small outdoor area, a courtyard filled with the soft glow of alien plants and a gentle breeze that carried scents Lyra had only imagined before. Her heart swelled with joy. The light of the twin suns, even in the early dawn, bathed the courtyard in warmth. Lyra stepped forward, feeling the soft ground beneath her feet for the first time. It was not the wide, open world she had dreamed of yet, but it was a taste of freedom, a first glimpse of the world beyond her chains. Elias followed, his eyes reflecting pride and encouragement. Together, they took a moment to savor the victory. Lyra's eyes widened as she explored the courtyard. Alien flowers glowed faintly in the low light, their petals moving gently with the breeze. Strange vines climbed the walls, intertwining with metallic beams in a way that was both natural and artificial. She could hear the distant chirps of creatures she had never seen, and the wind carried scents of life and growth. Every detail thrilled her senses. She felt alive in a way she had never experienced before, her mind filled with wonder and curiosity. Freedom, even in this small courtyard, was exhilarating. Over the next few days, Lyra and Elias explored the facility's outdoor areas carefully. The courtyard led to small gardens, hidden paths, and observation decks. Each area offered new sights, new textures, and new discoveries. Lyra reveled in the experience, her curiosity guiding her exploration. She learned to move quietly, to observe patterns of the natural and mechanical world alike, and to navigate the small spaces between walls and plants. Each success strengthened her confidence and her connection with Elias. She felt capable, intelligent, and deeply alive. Lyra also discovered that the courtyard had a small stream flowing through it. The water sparkled with the reflection of the twin suns and the moons, creating colors she had never imagined. She knelt by the stream, letting the cool water wash over her hands, marveling at its clarity and movement. Elias knelt beside her, watching with quiet delight. "It's beautiful," he whispered, and though Lyra did not understand all the words, she felt their meaning. Together, they had reached a place that no longer felt like a prison, a place that hinted at the vastness and wonder of the world beyond. As the days passed, Lyra's confidence grew. She began to explore the outer walls of the facility, mapping paths and hidden spaces in her mind. She noticed how the winds shifted, how the plants moved with the sun, and how the distant mountains glowed with colors that seemed to shift as the day progressed. Each observation added to her understanding of the world, giving her insight into how she might navigate it when she stepped beyond the facility entirely. She felt a deep sense of connection to the life around her, a reminder that the universe was vast, beautiful, and filled with possibilities. Elias continued to guide her patiently. He introduced small challenges to test her skills and observation, encouraging her to think critically and creatively. Sometimes, he would ask her to find paths or patterns, and she would respond using her intelligence and instincts. Their interactions were quiet but meaningful, filled with mutual respect and trust. Lyra realized that this partnership was not just about escaping. It was about learning, growing, and discovering what she was truly capable of. She felt proud of herself, proud of her abilities, and grateful for the kindness of Elias. One evening, as the twin moons rose again, Lyra and Elias sat on a ledge overlooking a small valley. The colors of the alien flora shimmered in the pale light, and distant creatures moved gracefully through the landscape. Lyra's heart swelled with a mixture of joy, wonder, and determination. She had learned, practiced, and grown in ways she had never imagined possible. She had experienced the first true taste of freedom, even within the confines of the facility, and she knew that the world beyond, vast, vibrant, and waiting, was within her reach. Lyra turned to Elias, her eyes shining with gratitude and excitement. Their bond, forged through patience, trust, and shared discovery, had become unbreakable. She realized that kindness and intelligence, courage and patience could achieve incredible things. She had been treated like an animal for so long, but now she felt seen, valued, and capable. The journey ahead would be long, but with Elias by her side, she knew it could be filled with discovery, learning, and joy. That night, as Lyra lay beneath the glowing light of the twin moons, she imagined the world beyond the facility. Forests that stretched endlessly, mountains that touched the sky, and rivers that sparkled with colors she had never dreamed of. She felt hope, excitement, and a deep sense of purpose. Freedom was no longer a distant dream. It was tangible, achievable, and within reach. With patience, intelligence, and courage, she knew she could explore, learn, and share her knowledge with the universe. And with Elias by her side, she felt ready to take the next steps into a world of endless possibilities. The morning air was crisp and filled with the scent of alien flora. Lyra stepped out of the last narrow corridor that had once kept her confined, feeling the soft grass beneath her feet and the warmth of the twin suns on her skin. Her chains were gone, replaced with freedom she had once only dreamed of. She paused for a moment, letting the sensations wash over her, the wind brushing her face, the light reflecting off the shimmering leaves, and the distant sound of creatures moving through the forests. Every detail filled her with a sense of joy and wonder. At that moment, she truly understood what freedom meant. Elias walked beside her, his expression calm but proud. He had guided her, encouraged her, and shared her determination, but this moment was entirely hers. Lyra could feel the exhilaration of choice, the ability to move, to explore, to be herself. She breathed deeply, letting the cool air fill her lungs, and took a tentative step forward. Each movement was deliberate yet natural. Her body remembered the exercises she had done in her chamber, the careful study of the facility, and the patient guidance of Elias. Freedom was not sudden. It had been built over weeks of learning, observation, and trust. As they moved through the forested landscape beyond the facility, Lyra began to notice the subtle beauties of her world. Flowers with translucent petals glowed softly under the twin suns. Trees stretched high into the sky, their leaves shifting colors as the light moved across them. Streams of crystal-clear water wound through the valleys, reflecting light like moving jewels. Lyra knelt beside one of the streams, dipping her fingers into the cool water and marveling at the sparkling patterns it created. She laughed softly, a sound she had not made in months, and felt a sense of pure delight. Elias smiled at her reaction. He had seen many worlds, studied countless species, and explored distant planets, but moments like this reminded him why he continued to journey. The joy of discovery, the wonder of life, and the power of kindness all merged in this small valley. Lyra's delight was contagious, and Elias felt a renewed appreciation for humanity's ability to nurture, guide, and share in the joy of others. Together, they walked along the edge of the stream, noticing patterns in the plants and creatures around them. Lyra's mind, always curious, recorded every detail, eager to learn, explore, and understand. As they ventured further, Lyra discovered that her senses had sharpened in captivity. She could detect slight changes in the wind, subtle movements of distant creatures, and even faint vibrations in the ground. These abilities allowed her to anticipate changes in the environment, navigate difficult terrain, and explore areas that might have been overlooked by others. She realized that her time in captivity, though difficult, had strengthened her mind and her awareness. She could now move with confidence, curiosity, and intelligence, and every step she took was a celebration of her resilience and growth. They came upon a meadow that stretched endlessly under the twin suns. The grass swayed gently with the wind, and small, glowing flowers dotted the landscape like scattered stars. Lyra ran forward instinctively, feeling the grass beneath her feet and the wind against her face. She laughed freely, her chains now just a memory. Elias followed, observing her joy with quiet satisfaction. Lyra's movements were graceful and confident, a reflection of her strength, her intelligence, and her determination to embrace life fully. For the first time, she felt completely herself, alive, capable, and free. As they continued their journey, Lyra encountered creatures of various shapes and sizes. Some were shy, retreating at her approach, while others observed her curiously from a distance. She approached them carefully, using the communication techniques she had learned in captivity to convey friendliness. The creatures responded with gentle gestures, chirps, and movements, showing curiosity rather than fear. Lyra felt a profound connection with these beings, realizing that kindness, patience, and understanding transcended species. Every interaction was a lesson, every gesture a reminder of the beauty and harmony that could exist in the universe. Elias guided her toward higher ground, where they could see the landscape stretch for miles. The forests, rivers, and mountains spread like a tapestry, each feature glowing under the twin suns. Lyra's eyes widened at the vastness of it all. She had been confined for so long that the world beyond her chains seemed unimaginable. Now, it was not only real but within her reach. She felt a surge of gratitude for Elias, whose patience and kindness had allowed her to experience this new world. He had believed in her when no one else did, and that belief had fueled her courage and determination. They reached the edge of a cliff overlooking a sparkling lake, the water reflecting the light of the suns and moons like liquid diamonds. Lyra knelt, touching the surface, and watched the ripples spread. She marveled at the colors, the patterns, and the life teeming beneath the water. Elias joined her, pointing out subtle details she might have missed. The way the sunlight danced on the waves, the reflections of the distant mountains, and the gentle movements of the creatures in the lake. Together they observed, shared knowledge, and celebrated the wonder of their surroundings. Lyra began to explore not only physically but mentally. She mapped the terrain in her mind, noting paths, rivers, and hidden areas. She imagined the adventures she could have, the creatures she could meet, and the knowledge she could gain. Her curiosity was insatiable, her joy unbounded. Each step revealed new wonders, each discovery deepened her understanding, and each interaction with Elias strengthened her sense of connection, trust, and friendship. She felt empowered, not only by her freedom, but by her ability to learn, adapt, and grow. The journey also offered lessons about humanity. Through Elias, Lyra observed the patience, kindness, and intelligence that humans could bring to the universe. She saw the value of compassion, the importance of trust, and the power of guidance. Humans, she realized, could be allies, friends, and teachers. They could help others reach their potential, and in doing so, create bonds that transcended differences in species, culture, or environment. This understanding filled Lyra with hope, not just for herself, but for the possibility of harmony between beings across the stars. As days passed, Lyra and Elias continued to explore distant valleys, glowing forests, and sparkling rivers. Each area revealed new life, new patterns, and new wonders. Lyra learned to navigate the terrain, observe the behavior of creatures, and understand the subtle rhythms of her environment. Elias shared knowledge of the stars, the universe, and the principles of human exploration. Together, they exchanged ideas, observations, and insights. Lyra's mind expanded, and she realized that freedom was not just physical, it was intellectual, emotional, and spiritual. One afternoon, they discovered a hidden grove where the plants emitted a soft, melodic hum. Lyra listened in awe, her senses alive with the harmony of the environment. Elias explained, through gestures and demonstrations, how vibrations could convey information, emotions, and even subtle patterns of communication. Lyra experimented, sending gentle pulses through her energy, and observed the plants' responses. She felt a sense of connection with the grove, understanding that every part of this world had a voice, a presence, and a story to tell. Her intelligence, once constrained by chains, now flourished in the open landscape. The bond between Lyra and Elias grew even stronger during these explorations. They shared moments of quiet reflection, observing the twin suns set over distant mountains, the moons rising to cast gentle light across valleys, and the shimmering rivers that wound through forests. Each moment reinforced their connection, built on trust, respect, and shared discovery. Lyra felt a deep sense of gratitude and admiration for Elias, who had guided her, believed in her, and treated her as a being of worth. Together, they had transcended captivity, exploring not only the world around them but the possibilities of friendship and mutual respect. Lyra also realized that freedom brought responsibility. She began to understand the delicate balance of her environment, the interdependence of plants, creatures, and the land itself. She learned to move thoughtfully, leaving no trace of disruption, and to observe carefully before acting. Elias encouraged this approach, demonstrating the importance of mindfulness, awareness, and respect for life. Lyra embraced these lessons wholeheartedly, understanding that true freedom was intertwined with care, intelligence, and compassion. In the following days, Lyra ventured further than she ever imagined. She crossed streams, climbed gentle hills, and explored hidden valleys. Each journey expanded her understanding, strengthened her confidence, and deepened her connection with the world. She realized that her life was no longer limited to the walls of a facility or the narrow confines of a chamber. The universe, vast and full of wonder, awaited her exploration. And with Elias by her side, she knew she could face any challenge, learn any lesson, and discover new possibilities. One evening, as the twin moons rose above a tranquil lake, Lyra sat quietly, reflecting on her journey. She had moved from captivity to freedom, from despair to hope, and from isolation to friendship. Her heart swelled with gratitude, joy, and determination. She understood the value of patience, the power of knowledge, and the importance of kindness. Elias sat beside her, sharing the quiet moment, and she felt a deep sense of connection. Together, they had created a world of possibility, a life of exploration, and a bond that transcended species. Lyra realized that her journey had only just begun. The universe was vast, full of mysteries, life, and beauty. She could explore, learn, and share her knowledge. She could encounter other beings, discover new worlds, and experience the infinite wonders of existence. And she would do so with courage, intelligence, and compassion, the qualities that had carried her through captivity and into freedom. She felt proud of herself, of humanity, and of the possibilities that lay ahead. As the twin moons reflected on the lake's surface, Lyra smiled. The chains were gone. The facility was behind her. The world stretched endlessly before her, vibrant and alive. And with Elias walking beside her, she knew that every step forward would be a step of joy, discovery, and hope. She had been treated like an animal, confined and overlooked, but now she was free. She was intelligent, capable, and alive, and the universe, in all its beauty, awaited her with open arms.